The silence was a surgical blade, slicing through the mundane morning. A dark SUV, windows like polished obsidian, glided along a quiet suburban street. No sirens wailed, no warnings flashed. Officer David Thorne, a cop seasoned by years in uniform and military past, felt the familiar thrum of an alert in his holster, a possible match to a vehicle involved in a recent break-in. Same make, same color. A black man driving alone. Suspicion wasn't a whisper. It was a full-throated shout in Thorne's mind. He eased his cruiser behind the SUV, tires hissing on the asphalt. No one was speeding. No lanes were crossed, yet an unquantifiable something gnawed at Thorne. He craved control, a solitary assertion of authority before the situation could escalate. Control the scene before the scene controls you, the Academy drill echoed, especially in high-risk traffic stops, especially when things didn't add up. What didn't add up was a serene power emanating from the driver, cloaked in a tailored suit and an unnerving stillness. The driver's hands, steady on the wheel, contrasted sharply with Thorne's voice, which cracked through the speaker. Step out of the vehicle now. Inside that SUV sat Director Elias Vance, head of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. In that electrifying moment, captured by a convenience store security camera, a nervous bystander's smartphone, and the unflinching eye of Thorne's dash cam, a local officer raised his weapon at the man who led the nation's most powerful domestic law enforcement agency. Thorne's finger curled, eyes hard, breath held. Vance didn't flinch, yell, or panic. He simply spoke. You're making a mistake you won't be able to unmake. This wasn't a Hollywood production. It was raw, unscripted reality. A moment poised to ignite a firestorm of headlines, legal battles, and civil rights outrage, viewed by millions on platforms hungry for content exposing systemic bias and racial profiling. It wasn't about titles or rank, but about assumptions, about power meeting the stark reflection of its own prejudice. The footage, already uploading, already acquiring hashtags, would soon form the backbone of a national conversation. This was no ordinary traffic stop. It was a spark before a reckoning. The suburban town of Willow Creek, nestled outside a bustling metropolis, exuded a deceptive calm. Tree-lined streets, charming markets, and enviable low crime rates masked an unspoken undercurrent. Officer Thorne, a decade on the force, was the department's go-to for non-standard stops. Firm presence, his captain called it. The whispers around town, however, spoke of a man who disliked being questioned, especially by those who didn't look like him. At 8:12 a.m., dispatch pinged his cruiser, black SUV, tinted windows, possible match to a morning burglary. Thorne didn't hesitate. It wasn't about race, he'd later claim, but instinct patterns, the kind no algorithm could verify, yet compelled him to tighten his grip whenever a certain profile came into view. He couldn't have known the man in the SUV wasn't part of any pattern. Elias Vance, the FBI director, was the architect of the very protocols Thorne swore to uphold. A constitutional scholar, anti-terror negotiator, former U.S. attorney. His presence alone could shift the tone of a courtroom. But power doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it rides quietly with tinted windows and GPS blackouts. That morning, Vance had chosen to drive himself to a confidential meeting, without an entourage, a mission that did include a gunpoint stop on a quiet stretch of Elmwood Avenue. The instant Thorne pulled behind the SUV, something shifted. He skipped calling for backup, bypassed a database double-check, and simply radioed. Vehicle matched. Proceeding. Inside the SUV, Vance saw the flashing lights, heard the silent command. He glanced in the rear-view mirror, recognizing the deviation from protocol. He slowed, signaled, and pulled over beneath a canopy of pine trees. The morning sun painted long shadows on the asphalt. He didn't reach for his phone, didn't call ahead. He waited. Thorne approached, right hand hovering near his belt, left tapping the door frame with calculated intent. Roll down the window, he said, his voice flat, almost bored. Vance complied. Can I ask what this stop is for? The question wasn't defiant, just measured. Thorne squinted, scanned the dash, noted the absence of visible registration, and muttered, license and registration. The silence returned, thick with unspoken tension. I could provide identification, Vance said, but I believe your system might not recognize this vehicle's details. It's government protected. License and registration. Thorne repeated slower, as if addressing a child. Vance reached slowly for his inside jacket pocket. Thorne stepped back, unlatching his holster. That small, practiced, chilling gesture was all it took for Vance to realize this wasn't about a vehicle description. It was about perceived control. No sirens, no shouting, just two men, two realities, and the tightrope between law and judgment. Vance's fingers paused above his inner pocket. Not fear, but calculation. Every motion, every glance now held immense stakes. As a black man, he'd learned early that composure wasn't suggestion. It was survival. As a federal director, he understood that perception could escalate faster than truth. His voice remained level. "Officer, before I move any further, I want you to be aware. My name is Elias Vance. I am the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Thorne blinked, a flicker of disbelief crossing his face like a fleeting cloud. Then something darker settled in. Not recognition, but a refusal to believe. "Out of the car," he said, his hand now gripping the holstered gun. The words weren't shouted, but they were loaded. Vance held his gaze steady. "I'm reaching for my wallet with my right hand." Thorne offered no reply, his silence a coiled spring of tension. Across the street, by a coffee truck, a civilian quietly pulled out a phone and hit record. The camera's red light blinked like a warning flare. Thorne didn't see it. Vance retrieved his wallet, unfolded the ID panel, and held it out. His badge gleamed in the morning light. Golden, unmistakable FBI credentials, Level 1 federal clearance. Thorne didn't move to take it. His eyes narrowed, then darted to Vance's face. "Nice forgery," he muttered. That sentence, clearly captured on video, would be replayed for months on news networks, in courtrooms, on YouTube reaction channels. It was a hinge on which the narrative would turn, not just a dismissal of identity, but an assertion of power over truth. Thorne didn't see a federal agent. He saw a black man with a badge, and something in him rejected it. The tension cracked open when Thorne took a step back and unclipped his holster. The gun didn't rise yet, but the weight of that motion pressed against the air like an approaching storm. "Sir, I'm ordering you to step out of the vehicle," he repeated. "We'll verify your identity at the station." Vance remained still. His voice, when it came, was low and sharp. "That won't be necessary. And if you draw your weapon, you will be held accountable for every second that follows." For the first time, Thorne hesitated. A flicker of conflict. Perhaps doubt, but ego is a dangerous second opinion. "Out now," he said louder, and this time the gun cleared the holster. The camera across the street kept rolling. Inside the SUV, Vance pressed a discreet panic switch near the steering column, sending a silent ping to the FBI's regional response team. 5 blocks away, a blacked-out government SUV roared to life. Its agents didn't know who was in danger, only that their director had triggered a high-risk alert. In Willow Creek, the world continued its rhythm. A cyclist pedaled by, headphones in, oblivious. A dog barked from a porch. And across the street, a teenage girl live-streamed the standoff under the title, "Something's Happening." Guy in suit held at gunpoint. #Willow Creek. Within minutes, the clip would be viral. Thorne's knuckles whitened around his sidearm's grip, sweat trickling down his neck. He'd crossed a line, but it was Vance's unwavering composure that truly unsettled him. The director remained seated, hands visible, posture unshaken. No panic, no begging, just a stillness that defied Thorne's expectations. That silent, dignified defiance fueled Thorne's flickering sense of control. The officer moved closer, the barrel aimed slightly off-center toward the windshield. Final warning, get out now. Vance didn't budge. Instead, slowly and deliberately, he turned his head and looked Thorne in the eyes. It wasn't a stare of fear or anger. It was a warning wrapped in patience. "You're being recorded," Vance said, "by at least 2 angles I can count. So, whatever you do next, make sure it survives playback." Thorne blinked, his adrenaline-blurred brain finally catching up. The teenager across the street, still holding her phone, was speaking into the mic. It's still going. He's got a badge. He's not yelling. The cop's freaking out. The situation had evolved into a spectacle, and in the age of real-time digital accountability, spectacle has consequences. Keywords like police misconduct, unlawful traffic stop, and racial profiling were already being typed into tags. Thorne took a half step back, muttering into his shoulder mic, "Subject is non-compliant. Possible federal impersonator. Requesting immediate." He paused, unsure how to proceed. Backup, arrest authority. None of it fit. Acknowledging the badge meant admitting he'd escalated against a federal officer without cause. Ignoring it meant facing consequences for disregarding legitimate identification. His next words were hollow. Stay in the car. That moment of retreat might have de-escalated things. Had a second black SUV not pulled into view. Dark windows, government-grade plates. It didn't flash lights or screech to a halt. It simply coasted into position behind Thorne's cruiser, silent, taking up space. Thorne's instinct finally turned to alarm. He spun, weapon lowered slightly but still dangerously raised. A man in tactical plain clothes stepped out, earpiece glinting. "Sir, lower your weapon. Step away from the vehicle." It wasn't a request. It was an order, delivered by a trained federal response agent, his voice calm, practiced, and firm. Thorne hesitated. "Who the hell are you?" The agent didn't flinch. "I'm the one you'll answer to if you don't lower that firearm right now." The moment froze. Traffic stopped. Time thinned, as a jurisdictional nightmare unfolded in real time under the gaze of cameras, live streams, and soon, cable news producers hungry for viral headlines. Vance finally stepped out, slow and measured. He didn't need to shout or wave credentials. He simply stood there. "Let him speak," he told the agent, then turned to Thorne, whose eyes darted between disbelief and the slow erosion of every assumption he clung to. "Officer," Vance said, "you just pointed a loaded weapon at a federal official with no probable cause, in front of multiple live witnesses and your own dash cam. Take a breath and think." This was the moment of exposed power, not flexed by force, but revealed by discipline. A crowd had gathered. Cafe patrons, dog walkers, a jogger pausing mid-stride. Phones were out. Whispers turned to murmurs. "Is that real?" floated through the air. Every second became content. Every twitch a possible meme. Every word a potential courtroom exhibit. Yet, at the center of it all stood Vance, unarmed, unshaken, undeniably in control. Not because he yelled, but because he didn't have to. Thorne's lips parted, but nothing came out. Not orders, not apologies. He looked at the crowd, at the phone screens held aloft like tiny judgment panels. His training hadn't prepared him for this. Not for the silence, not for the spectacle, not for the moment when his badge no longer protected him from the weight of his own decisions. His finger trembled near the trigger guard, then dropped. The gun lowered slowly, its barrel finally dipping toward the pavement. The response agent nodded, stepping forward and taking the weapon from Thorne's hand. "You're done," the agent said quietly. "Step back." Thorne stumbled. As if realizing for the first time, he was standing on stage with no script. His earpiece crackled. Unit 7 status. He didn't answer. A second agent approached, took his elbow, and guided him gently but firmly away. Thorne's face was a portrait of confusion wrapped in pride, making him more dangerous. He looked back once at Vance, who had not moved. The crowd shifted. A woman stepped forward, phone still recording, her voice firm but respectful. "Sir, are you okay? Do you need a lawyer present?" It wasn't condescending. It was civic, protective. In the era of viral police brutality videos, people knew not to trust silence. Vance turned to her, gave a small nod. "I'm fine. Thank you for staying. Your recording matters." Behind him, the federal agent coordinated with FBI command. Another government vehicle was dispatched to escort Vance to his meeting. For Vance, containment wasn't the goal. Exposure was. This wasn't just about clearing his name. It was about holding a mirror up to mechanics of power. He walked past Thorne, now handcuffed in the back of a patrol vehicle. No longer an officer, but a suspect. That explosion wasn't loud. It was internal. The fall from authority wasn't marked by a sound, but by the click of a door shutting and the stillness of a man who finally realized his badge didn't protect him from his actions. Thorne didn't speak as Vance passed. He didn't plead. He didn't shout. He just looked down, perhaps for the first time in years, and saw himself the way others had seen him all along, a man who had the law, but not the justice. Then came the media vans, fast, tipped off by live streams, hashtags, and real-time alerts. Within minutes, a local news affiliate had boots on the ground. Unarmed federal official held at gunpoint during routine stop. The cheering would later read. But those on site knew it wasn't routine. It was a ritual. The ritual of suspicion, of pattern recognition twisted into prejudice, of power misapplied, unchecked, and untrained in de-escalation. Vance agreed to speak briefly. Today's events are not isolated, he said. They are symptoms of a deeper pattern we can no longer ignore. I am safe, but safety should not depend on titles. The soundbite went viral, cut into clips, reposted on Instagram Reels, TikTok, and monetized YouTube Shorts. The message beneath the virality resonated. Justice doesn't begin with titles. It begins with accountability. As the last agent secured the scene, Vance took a quiet call. It was the Attorney General, asking not what happened, but what Vance wanted to do next. That question would ripple into hearings and policy shifts. But for now, on that Pine Line Street, it was enough to know the world was watching. And this time, the footage didn't come from body cams, doctored or delayed. It came from bystanders who refused to look away. It took 18 hours for footage to reach critical mass. By sunrise the next day, the incident was a digital firestorm. Headlines blasted across platforms. FBI director held at gunpoint. Local cop sparks federal outrage. Reddit threads dissected frame-by-frame moments from multiple angles. TikTok creators looped the exchange under hashtags like hashtag police misconduct, hashtag qualified immunity, and hashtag racial bias unmasked. YouTube commentary channels dropped 10-minute breakdowns with thumbnails screaming abuse of power exposed and this cop picked the wrong car. While the internet churned, a quieter, more dangerous wave rolled through Washington. The Department of Justice wasn't just watching, they were preparing. Overnight, an internal review task force was activated. Thorne's personnel file was pulled and filtered. What emerged was a twist Vance hadn't expected but would fully utilize. 3 prior complaints, all sealed, internally dismissed, all from drivers of color. In 2019, a Hispanic teacher reported being pulled over and ordered to lie face down at gunpoint for a busted taillight. In 2021, a single black mother was accused of driving erratically in a school drop-off lane. The final one, just 6 months ago, involved a military veteran in uniform stopped for matching a description with no follow-up filed. These weren't just unfortunate incidents. They were a pattern of racial profiling backed by omission and tolerated through silence. Thorne's department had quietly settled one civil suit out of court, paid from taxpayer money, no press release. When these files hit Vance's secure inbox, the weight of it wasn't just personal. It was systemic. It proved this wasn't about him. He was just the first powerful enough to trigger exposure. Vance didn't respond with rage. He responded with strategy. He scheduled a live press briefing, not for optics, but to reclaim the narrative. At the podium, before a wall of flags, the seal of the Department of Justice cast in muted gold, stood Vance, steady as ever, eyes clear. This is not a story about one officer. It's about the space we allow for patterns to grow in silence. Accountability is not vengeance. It is maintenance of trust, of safety, of law. The room was packed. Networks streamed it live. Social media reposted clips with captions like, "The calm before reform," and "When integrity speaks." But Vance wasn't finished. Behind the scenes, he had already forwarded the sealed files to a federal civil rights prosecutor, requesting immediate review under Title VI. Not internal discipline, but federal criminal charges. That move was unprecedented. It turned a local abuse of power into a national legal precedent. Meanwhile, Thorne was suspended without pay, then quietly moved to secure holding location. When contacted by reporters, his lawyer offered a pre-written statement. My client believed he was acting within protocol based on vehicle descriptions and lack of registration confirmation. But the footage said otherwise. So did the audio. So did the patterns. The second twist came not from Vance, but from the public. The teenage girl who filmed the first live stream was interviewed by 3 major networks. Her original video had garnered over 18 million views, monetized under YouTube's partner program, and sponsored by 2 civil rights organizations. Her quote became symbolic. "I didn't know who he was. I just knew it wasn't right." That unfiltered clarity hit harder than any editorial. Law students cited her clip. Advocacy groups used it in training seminars. Suddenly, digital witness culture was no longer fringe. It was a new frontier of public oversight. Vance used that momentum. He wasn't campaigning or angling for sympathy. He was doing what federal law enforcement rarely had the room to do: set a standard. Less than a week after the stop, the U.S. Attorney's Office confirmed it had opened a formal investigation into Officer Thorne for civil rights violations under Federal Statute 18 U.S.C. Section 242, a rare but powerful charge that criminalizes the deprivation of rights under color of law. It sent shockwaves to the law enforcement community, not because it had never been done, but because it was being done now with evidence collected not by official cameras, but by the people. The digital receipts were airtight. No tampering, no edits. Just a timeline showing escalation without cause and authority misused under the thin veil of suspicion. Meanwhile, Vance wasn't finished. In an unexpected move, he personally requested to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee, not as a victim, but as a law enforcement leader sounding the alarm. The room was packed. His opening remarks were direct. "We have mechanisms for justice, but no mechanism to stop the routine erosion of trust between officers and the public. That erosion happens when silence protects bias, when footage replaces reform, and when apologies arrive long after the harm is done." He didn't use Thorne's name. He didn't have to. By now, the entire country knew the story. Lawmakers across party lines nodded in silent agreement. Even those hesitant to embrace systemic critique couldn't deny the footage, the evidence trail, the data. This wasn't politics. It was proof. Simultaneously, cities nationwide began reevaluating their local protocols. Departments announced policy audits. Bias recognition training and escalation review boards became new terms flooding municipal budgets. Police union heads appeared on national television, some defensive, some cautiously optimistic. One notable comment came from a state chief. "If this can happen to the FBI director, what does that say about how safe the average person feels?" Vance's response came during a sit-down interview. "You don't need to fear law enforcement, but law enforcement should fear the absence of accountability." Within 48 hours, that quote became a call to action. Amid this national pivot, Thorne sat alone in a holding cell, awaiting indictment. Interviews with colleagues painted a murky portrait, competent but rigid, respected by some, feared by others. None outright defended his actions. One anonymous officer confessed he always believed he had control of the scene before it controlled him, but sometimes it was never his control in the first place. The final twist landed in the form of a lawsuit, not from Vance, but from the 3 other civilians previously profiled by Thorne. Their cases, once settled or buried, now gained new life. Attorneys filed a joint class action suit citing discriminatory conduct and unlawful detainment. The suit gained traction and headlines. More importantly, it reframed the entire narrative. This wasn't just about a powerful man caught in the crosshairs. It was about a system finally being forced to answer for every person it had ignored. And in that answer came a new form of accountability. Not reactive, but proactive. The twist wasn't that Thorne had finally met someone with more power. The twist was that the system itself, once opaque and self-defending, had finally been made visible. And in that visibility, the people found not vengeance, but clarity. When the courtroom doors closed behind him, Thorne didn't look back. His uniform was gone. So was the badge. What remained was a man stripped of his shield. Not just a physical kind, but the kind we wear when we believe we're right, because no one's ever told us we're wrong. His sentence wasn't lengthy, but it was definitive. A conviction for civil rights violations. No more patrol. No more procedural immunity. just time and a record. Outside the courthouse, Director Vance didn't stand at a podium. He stood alone in the quiet shadow of a federal building, breathing in the slow, deliberate air of resolution. No victory speech, no personal triumph. The system had worked, not because it wanted to, but because it had to, because cameras rolled, because people cared, because silence this time was not an option. In a later interview, when asked what moment he'd remember most, Vance didn't mention the gun or the courtroom or the headlines. He mentioned the girl who filmed. She didn't know who I was, he said. She just knew what was happening wasn't right. That's citizenship. That's democracy in motion. It wasn't about viral views or justice hashtags. It was about conscience. Thorne, meanwhile, gave no interviews. He declined to appeal, but one letter surfaced, leaked from a journal entry during his time in custody. In it, he wrote, "I believed I was defending the public. I see now that I was defending my fear." There was no excuse, no dramatic apology, just a man beginning to name the very thing that poisoned his decisions. Bias unchallenged, authority unchecked. In the month that followed, policy reform spread slowly but surely. Departments installed third-party review panels. Traffic stops required body cam justifications. Training curriculum shifted from dominance to de-escalation, from protocol to psychological readiness. Vance continued his service, not with bitterness, but clarity. He spoke at universities, sat with civic leaders, and helped draft a bipartisan bill that would allocate federal grants to police departments prioritizing community-first policing and implicit bias education. But the moral wasn't just written in policy. It echoed in households, in classrooms, in quiet conversations between parents and children about what justice looks like, and more importantly, what it feels like. Because the ending wasn't about Thorne's punishment. It was about the millions who watched, listened, reflected, and asked, "What would I have done?" There's a line in Vance's speech to the Senate that never made it to headlines but stayed in the transcript. A line meant not for applause, but for memory. True power is not the ability to command fear. It's the courage to face the mirror before someone else holds it up. That mirror was held up. The world looked in, and this time, it didn't look away.